Joining us now on the program is therapist Carrie Krawiec from the Birmingham Maple Clinic, joining us as always for our weekly mental health segment on today's edition of the Megacast. Carrie, thanks for being with us again.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you on as we are recognizing May as Mental Health Awareness Month. And this week, something we want to focus on is exploring the ways that trauma can influence somebody, both from that moment or those moments that onset the trauma, but also the ways that it can recur and continue to have an effect on people in the days, the weeks, the months, the years, the decades beyond that. And there's so much to unpack when it comes to trauma. So let's begin exploring it with just the basics about how trauma affects both the mind and the body in various ways.
Sure. So like you said, in the event of trauma, which nearly all of us will experience some form of traumatic event in our lifetime, in the moment, it activates our sympathetic nervous system, which is what we call our fight or flight response. So initially, upon being startled or traumatized in some way, you'll experience increased heart rate, confusion, agitation, irritation, irritability. You will have muscle tension and maybe shortness of breath or chest tightness. So all of those things you may encounter. A traumatic event can be a single event, or it can be a long sustained trauma. So the thing is too, is like an animal may experience a traumatic event and you quite literally see an animal shake it off. And many of us might even shake off things that happen to us often. What happens during trauma is that our brain can remain forever changed. And for some people, it may stay in that heightened state and not really be able to sort of shake it off and move forward, which is when you see post-traumatic stress. Someone may keep recurring those traumatic responses to a broad range of experiences in their lifetime. As a result of the changes of a brain, we also get changes to our stress hormones, which impact our body, which impact our digestion, and other areas of our body.
And it manifests in so many different ways because in some ways, in many ways, the body is and the mind are wired to be able to address these issues, to kind of, as you say, shake them off. But in many other ways, too, the body is wired to want to address these issues and to have a need to clear some of these traumas or address some of these traumas and cope with them in more significant ways. So let's discuss that dynamic, because that can have a number of different influences on how someone responds to trauma and ultimately that impact that the trauma can have on them.
Sure. So you're absolutely right. We are animals, we are mammals. So there's a part of our brain, right, we call like our reptilian brain part that's responsible, right, for these fight or flight responses. If that was just who we were, if that was as simple as form of who we were, we would probably be able to shake it off just like an animal. But because we have these more complex thinking systems, you're absolutely right. Our brain, our part of our survival requires us to probably suppress our trauma and move on. But because we're more complex beings, it stays right in our mind and our memory and impacts us different ways. And the research really supports the forms of therapy such as EMDR, different forms of meditation, connecting breathing, and mindfulness techniques to really help us regulate what has been dysregulated by our brain by the act of trauma. So something like EMDR helps a person both be able to talk and understand their feelings, understand their trauma, understand their memories, while also helping them manage and calm and cope with the upsetting things that are happening in their brain and body. And so there are other techniques that help kind of foster that same experience, so that people can make connections, have those kind of therapeutic aha moments while strengthening their brain's ability to regulate after something that's dysregulated them.
And especially, Carrie, as we think about addressing a variety of different mental health issues, we think about, especially in recent years, where that stigma has sort of been reduced, sort of has compressed, and isn't so overbearing on our society, that people are talking about the mental health issues. And in particular, when I'm thinking about some of the ways that we have in the past, or as we've talked about and discussed already, the brain's natural ability to suppress some of those traumas. I think a lot about the stigma that's particularly been on men in the past about addressing their mental health issues, which can include these traumas that really it's just been supposed to, rub some dirt on it, move on, take a breath, take a walk, and deal with it. That can have a significant influence on someone if they don't address these issues, especially if they leave them latent and continue to brush them off for a number of years. So just how important is it to get in on these sorts of treatments or addressing trauma at an early stage, but also factoring in that people are processing trauma in different ways, and you never want to force somebody into those sorts of conversations that can really in many ways be triggering too.
Sure, I think you're absolutely right. So the sort of prolonged ignoring or denying of certain emotional experiences can contribute to sort of other behaviors or other mental health issues. If you're having sort of increased anger, agitation, might cause some relational problems. If you have feelings and you don't like them and you're working to suppress them, it might include addiction or substance use, things like that. So sometimes people enter into treatment after they've already tried these other maladaptive ways to sort of make those feelings, make those experiences, make those memories go away. And so, right, addressing it early and often can prevent the need for some of those other issues to arise, to recognize the potential. Certainly, the best treatments sort of offer like a conjunction of treatments. Maybe some medication might help to soothe the anxiety and depression that's happening initially, but perhaps also talk therapy, like said, to understand, to have those aha moments, to kind of like sort of release and free them from your memory instead of having to sort of think about them all the time. These treatments like EMDR that help the brain regulate and calm while also talking about difficult or stressful things. All of those things, right, can help prevent worse problems from coming down the road.
So then, as a mental health professional, how do you and others address these traumas when you do have a patient or you have patients that are coming to you to address this? Because on the one hand, like we said, you want to be sensitive to the effect that this trauma's had on them, but also to really dive into these issues and address them head on, you do have to kind of reopen that door that the body has been trying to hold shut for all those years. So as a professional, how do you address that?
So I think a therapist is going to, again, educate their clients. So of course, offer them some information that what we're doing will be difficult. Also each session, educating about sort of the shape or form of a session is going to have a beginning, middle, and end. And we're going to be sure before we leave or finish that we kind of tie things off. So, and even educating for the potential, it may come up now in the days between our next appointment and what to expect or how to behave or how to respond in the event that it does. So right, offering that just sort of education about what's typical, certainly monitoring the feedback you're getting. Sometimes you may not realize what is or isn't connected to a trauma. And as you're talking about something, you may notice the eye movement change, you may notice the body posture change, tearfulness, something about them. And then that's an opportunity as a therapist to kind of touch base. Shall we go further down this path or shall we retreat? Certainly writing in between sessions, writing is a skill to be able to give a space and a place to something that might be coming up for you, but then also to be able to sort of shut it and move on with your life and the time in between sessions.
You can get in contact with Carrie, Krawiec, and the professionals at the Birmingham Maple Clinic by visiting their website at birminghammaple.com. That is birminghammaple.com for more information. And whether it is those weekly or multiple times weekly sessions that you may have with a therapist or another mental health professional, or other forms of therapy and release, those can really have a big impact over time. The more that you are immersing in sort of these different coping mechanisms to not necessarily escape the trauma, but to maybe lessen the severity of the recurring instances of trauma that affect all of us in some ways, some very severely and some in just minute ways on a day-to-day basis. So what are some other things that people can be doing in addition to therapy or in addition to regular sessions with a mental health professional to help address some of these traumas in their life?
Certainly yoga is an amazing thing, especially yoga practitioners who are familiar with trauma. yoga can help combine the breathing and mindfulness techniques along with muscle relaxation and stretching and strengthening that help offer people, again, ability to sort of like rewire where trauma had disrupted the brain's wiring. Yoga can help be beneficial to help make those connections again and help a person feel control, but also give the skills to how to like sort of free or empty the mind from those recurring thoughts. There are some other neat techniques. One is called neurofeedback, but it's some like basically like some scalp sensors connected to a screen that help people look at their own brain waves and then do some therapeutic kind of video gamey type exercises that help them teach and modify their own brains wave to help get that kind of control. Certainly writing, talk therapy, and even group therapy and engaging with other people with similar stories, just feeling connected. Telling your story to other people has a positive effect for the teller and also the receiver, especially when it comes to resilience. So when a person knows that they themselves have overcome something because also others that care about them have overcome things, that sort of sense of pride and accomplishment can help be really help foster resilience.
And when it comes to these results, so many people that have experienced trauma, and especially those who have left it latent and maybe not have addressed it for a number of years or even decades, they may look at a conversation like this. They may hear a conversation like we're having now and say, well, and at this point, how is it even going to be helpful to me? So from a professional standpoint, as you see these results, and you have seen these results and your colleagues have over the course of years, just how much of a difference does it make from somebody pre-treatment or pre-mental health consultation to during or after to be addressing these traumas in these ways, whether it is therapy with a professional or other forms of therapy like exercise or yoga or something like that?
Sure, like I said, I mean, and we've talked about this before, of course, things happen, mental health issues happen in families, and sometimes you may not know the precursors. Having some insider information about your own and even being able to share that information. If when you go to a doctor, you want to be able to share, yes, we have a family history of cardiac events, or we have a family history of this, but it can be actually a huge important piece of information for the generations that come after you to know, hey, there was this trauma and this is the response to it. And these were the results we got, right? That information can inform the coming generations for what will work for them, for what to be aware of or prepared for if something happens. And right, so it can be even just talking about it, and like I said, talking about it in families can be so restorative and therapeutic for other generations. Say, hey, I had no idea, to gain some insider awareness of things that their parents or other people had experienced that may have shaped their parenting, shaped their relationships, shaped their mental health, and can just offer some insight and compassion and grace for why things are the way they are.
And outside of discussing these traumas with a professional, discussing them with people in your life that you do trust, that you do know that may have been alongside you during those times that you had faced those traumas can also play an important role. So from that other person's standpoint, what would you suggest as a professional for them to help bring this other person along that they have in their life, that they care about, that they know may have experienced a trauma or a set of traumas, to help discuss that with them as well and provide that support system without either being overbearing or, God forbid, triggering in their help?
Sure. I mean, I think again, just like offering some education, it's coming from a desire to be close. It's coming from a desire to understand, and it's that it's coming from, like a genuine need. It's intimacy and vulnerability go hand in hand, right? And that take a risk to reveal something personal about your life that you may have encountered, especially something traumatic or scary in some form of way. But that when we do that, then the other person responds either with sharing something also about themselves or their life, or by just being, kind and available and responsive, and that relationships grow in that way, right? That now we don't always have to just be reliving vulnerable moments, right? But that back and forth is really one of the ways that intimacy is fostered, especially in our, our romantic relationships, but really in any form.
You can find more information, get in contact with Carrie and the team at the Birmingham Maple Clinic by calling 248-646-6659, 248-646-6659, or visiting them on birminghammaple.com. Carrie, before we let you go, anything else we haven't discussed yet, or other things that people should be keeping in mind when it comes to considering the traumas that they've experienced, addressing the traumas they've experienced, or helping others address the traumas in their life?
Sure. I mean, I think one thing, even hearing you say the word trauma, right, is that there's such a range of things that people would experience. Like I said, some could be one isolated instance, something could be something more sustained or prolonged. It could be in the present or the past. Like to not sort of police each other or compare with each other about whose trauma is more trauma-y, right? That it's like it's totally unique to each person. And same with the after effects. We said some people may shake off something that seems exceptionally like, how could they ever get through this, but then be very reactive to something smaller. And it's like there's no real rhyme or reason why certain traumas impact us differently than others, or different people differently than others. But to just be patient and kind if you're experiencing the results of trauma. It doesn't matter if it was a big one or not.
Yeah, trauma is trauma. It affects people in a number of different ways. Even what is considered to be the slightest, so to speak, trauma can have a massive effect on someone for a number of years and shape both their lives and the lives of those involved in their family or in their social circles as well. Carrie, thank you so much for your insight and talking to us about this issue today.
Thank you, as always, for having me.